Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most beloved and iconic Barbie animated films ever made, Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper, released in 2004. This is not just a casual recap. We are going to cover everything: the full overview, the detailed plot, the cast, the production background, the release details, and why this film holds such a special place in the hearts of so many people who grew up watching it. So sit back, relax, and let us get into it. Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper is an American computer-animated direct-to-video musical fantasy film produced by Mainframe Entertainment and distributed by Universal Studios Home Entertainment under the Hit Entertainment label. It was released in the United States on September 28, 2004. The film is loosely based on Mark Twain's classic 1881 novel The Prince and the Pauper, but it is reimagined entirely as a Barbie story set in a fictional medieval European kingdom. The story centers on two young women, a princess named Anneliese and a peasant girl named Erika, who are identical in appearance despite coming from completely different walks of life. The film explores themes of identity, freedom, friendship, love, and self-discovery through an engaging musical format. What made this film stand out at the time of its release was that it was a significant step forward in Barbie's animated universe. This was the first Barbie film to feature two main characters played by the same actress, making it a dual-role adventure unlike any previous Barbie production. The film is also a full-on musical, featuring original songs that were widely praised and became extremely popular among fans of the franchise. The story is narrated by a talking cat named Serafina, who belongs to Princess Anneliese, and a talking dog named Wolfie, who belongs to Erika, giving the film an additional layer of warmth and personality. The film runs approximately 86 minutes and was rated G, making it appropriate for all ages. Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper was directed by William Lau, with the screenplay written by Cliff Ruby and Ilana Lesser. The music was composed by Arnie Roth, and original songs were written by Andy Sturmer. The film was part of a growing Barbie direct-to-video series that had started in 2001 with Barbie in the Nutcracker. The story takes place in the fictional kingdom of Dulcia. We are introduced to Princess Anneliese, a young, intelligent, and kind-hearted royal who dreams of studying science, exploring the world, and living a life beyond the walls of the palace. Despite her royal status, Anneliese feels trapped and controlled, as she is set to be married off to the wealthy and selfish King Dominic in order to save her kingdom from debt. On the other side of the kingdom lives Erika, a cheerful, spirited, and musically gifted peasant girl who works in the royal seamstress shop to pay off her family's debt to the greedy and conniving Madame Carp. Erika dreams of escaping her life of servitude and seeing the world freely. Though her life is full of hard labor, she remains hopeful, optimistic, and full of joy, expressing herself through song. One day, Anneliese escapes from the palace to wander the town, and she crosses paths with Erika. The two are stunned to discover that they are completely identical in appearance. Despite their radically different lives and social standings, the two quickly form a friendship built on mutual understanding and a shared sense of longing for freedom. Meanwhile, the royal advisor, a sinister man named Preminger, has been secretly plotting to take over the kingdom. He has caused the kingdom's gold mines to run dry by secretly stealing the gold for himself. He intends to use the financial crisis to manipulate the queen and eventually seize the throne. To execute his plan, he kidnaps Princess Anneliese and hides her in a cave, planning to eliminate her so he can take power. With Anneliese missing, Erika agrees to disguise herself as the princess to keep the royal household from falling into panic. She moves into the palace, learns the customs of royalty, and begins spending time with King Dominic, who turns out to be nothing like his cold reputation. He is actually kind, thoughtful, and genuine, and the two begin to fall in love, even though Erika knows she is not the real princess. Meanwhile, Princess Anneliese is imprisoned in the cave, where she meets the royal tutor named Julian, who has been searching for her. Julian, who has secretly loved Anneliese for a long time, discovers her captivity, and the two work together to find a way out. Over time, Anneliese realizes that her true feelings align with Julian, not with the arranged marriage to King Dominic. As both storylines progress, Preminger's plot begins to unravel. Erika, while impersonating the princess, uncovers clues about what really happened to Anneliese and the stolen gold. She risks everything to expose Preminger and rescue her friend. When the truth is finally revealed, Preminger is caught and brought to justice. The film concludes with a heartwarming resolution. Anneliese and Julian are free to be together, as their bond has grown into genuine love through their trials. Erika and King Dominic also confess their feelings for each other. Erika is freed from her debt and her servitude to Madame Carp. Most movingly, Anneliese uses her position to ensure that Erika is no longer bound to a life of hardship. The two friends, a princess and a pauper, each find their own version of freedom and love, proving that true identity is not determined by status or circumstance but by character and heart. Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper was produced at Mainframe Entertainment, a Canadian computer animation studio based in Vancouver, British Columbia. The studio had already established a working relationship with Mattel through earlier Barbie films and brought a high level of polish to this production. The visual design of the film drew heavily from idealized European medieval architecture, fairy tale color palettes, and theatrical costume design, creating a world that felt both timeless and magical. The film's director, William Lau, worked closely with the writing team of Cliff Ruby and Ilana Lesser, who were responsible for crafting the screenplay. Ruby and Lesser had also written several other Barbie films, bringing a consistent and well-understood tone to the franchise. Their approach for this film focused specifically on making the dual heroine story feel emotionally resonant rather than superficial, a task they accomplished by giving both Anneliese and Erika distinct personalities, goals, and emotional arcs. The music of the film is widely considered one of its greatest strengths. Andy Sturmer, who had been involved in earlier Barbie films, wrote a collection of original songs for the movie that struck a balance between pop accessibility and theatrical storytelling. The orchestral arrangements were composed by Arnie Roth, whose work added grandeur and emotional depth to the film's musical sequences. Songs in the film were performed by the voice cast, with Kelly Sheridan performing the vocal parts for both Anneliese and Erika, an extraordinary achievement that reinforced the dual role concept throughout the entire movie. The film features several memorable original songs that fans of the franchise still discuss decades later. The opening song introduces the two heroines and their contrasting worlds. Individual character songs develop their dreams and desires, and a concluding song ties together the emotional themes of the film. The music was released as a separate soundtrack album following the film's debut. Mattel's involvement in the film ensured that the story aligned with the values the brand wanted to communicate: friendship, inner beauty, bravery, and the idea that what makes someone special is not their wealth or rank but who they are on the inside. These themes were woven intentionally through both the screenplay and the lyrics of the songs. Release date and distribution: Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper was officially released on September 28, 2004, in the United States as a direct-to-video production. It was distributed by Universal Studios Home Entertainment in partnership with Hit Entertainment. The film was available in both VHS and DVD formats, with the DVD version including bonus features such as a music video, a virtual doll dressing game, and behind-the-scenes material. Being a direct-to-video release, the film did not receive a wide theatrical run. However, this distribution model was standard for Barbie's animated series at the time, and it proved to be extraordinarily successful. The Barbie direct-to-video line had already established a loyal and large audience of children and families who would purchase or rent these titles, and The Princess and the Pauper performed exceptionally well within that market. The film was released internationally under the same title in multiple languages and territories. Dubbed versions were produced for many markets, and the film enjoyed a global audience. In many countries, local voice actors were brought in to record the dialogue, and in some cases the songs were also adapted into local languages. Following its initial home video release, the film was also broadcast on various television networks around the world, further expanding its audience. Over the years it has been re-released in multiple home video formats including Blu-ray, and it remains available on various streaming and digital platforms. Its longevity as a beloved title in the Barbie catalog speaks to how well-crafted and emotionally resonant the film truly is. There is your full YouTube script for Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper, 2004. Here is a quick summary of what is covered inside. The script opens with an engaging introduction that pulls the viewer in, followed by a thorough overview explaining where the film comes from, produced by Mainframe Entertainment in the United States and distributed by Universal Studios Home Entertainment, and what makes it unique as the first Barbie film to feature a dual-role lead character. The plot section walks through the entire story in rich detail, from Princess Anneliese's longing for freedom to Erika's life of servitude, the villain Premanger's conspiracy, the identity swap, and the emotional resolution for both heroines. The cast section covers every major voice performer, including Kelly Sheridan's remarkable dual performance. The production section covers the studio background, the writing team, and the celebrated music by Andy Sturmer and Arnie Roth. The release section explains the direct-to-video model and international distribution. The legacy section reflects on the film's cultural staying power and generational nostalgia. The world of Dulcia and two very different lives. The story begins in the magical fictional kingdom of Dulcia, a land of rolling meadows, stone castles, cobblestone streets, and cheerful townspeople. The kingdom is prosperous on the surface, but as we will soon learn, it is quietly crumbling beneath the weight of debt and deception. Two narrators set the stage from the very beginning, a prim and elegant white cat named Serafina and a scrappy, lovable dog named Wolfie. Their personalities could not be more different, and they bicker and chatter throughout the tale, giving the film warmth and gentle humor from its very first moments. The first character we meet is Princess Anneliese. She lives in the grand royal palace of Dulcia, surrounded by wealth, servants, marble hallways, and every material comfort imaginable. She is beautiful, gracious, and beloved by the people of the kingdom, who adore her royal presence. But behind the golden doors of her chambers, Anneliese feels something that no crown or gown can fix. She feels trapped. She is an intellectually curious young woman with a deep passion for science, astronomy, and discovery. She keeps books hidden under her mattress, sneaks away to her private study to work on scientific experiments, and dreams endlessly of the day she might travel the world freely, see new places, and learn everything the world has to offer. The life she has been given is one of royal duty, not personal freedom, and that tension weighs on her every day. Her mother, the Queen of Dulcia, is a kind and warm woman, but she is consumed by worry. The kingdom is in serious financial trouble. The royal gold mines, which have long powered the kingdom's economy, have mysteriously run dry. The treasury is nearly empty, the people are struggling, and the queen sees only one solution: a marriage alliance. She has arranged for Anneliese to be married to King Dominic, a wealthy monarch from a neighboring kingdom. The queen believes this marriage will save Dulcia from financial ruin. Anneliese, Though she loves her mother and understands the gravity of the situation, cannot hide her sorrow at the thought of a loveless arranged marriage to someone she has never met. On the other side of Dulcia, in the narrow winding streets of the town, we meet Erika. She is a young woman of common birth, full of life, humor, and irrepressible spirit. Erika works long and exhausting hours in the royal seamstress shop, a place owned by the cold, greedy, and deeply unpleasant Madame Carp. Erika has been working in this shop since she was a child because her family had borrowed money from Madame Carp and could not repay it. To settle the debt, Erika was handed over as essentially an indentured worker, her labor used as repayment. No matter how hard she works, Madame Carp always finds new ways to extend the debt, ensuring Erika can never truly be free. Despite her difficult circumstances, Erika is not bitter or broken. She is joyful, fiercely independent in spirit, and blessed with a beautiful singing voice that she uses to express everything she cannot say out loud. She dreams of leaving the seamstress shop forever, of traveling to far-off places, and of living a life where her choices are her own. Her dreams are as large as Anneliese's, even if the two have never met and come from entirely different worlds. Chapter 2: The Advisor in the Shadows. While both young women navigate their constrained lives, a much darker story is unfolding in the corridors of the royal palace. The Queen's chief royal advisor, a man named Preminger, is not at all what he appears to be. On the surface, he is polished, well-spoken, and positioned as a trusted member of the royal court. He stands close to the Queen, offers his counsel on all matters of state, and presents himself as deeply devoted to the well-being of Dulcia. But Preminger is a villain of the most calculating kind. He is ambitious, selfish, and consumed by a hunger for power. For a long time, he has secretly harbored a desire to rule Dulcia himself. He does not want to serve a queen, he wants to be king. And he has been working toward that goal through a scheme of remarkable patience and cruelty. It is Preminger who is responsible for the kingdom's financial crisis. He has been secretly diverting gold from the royal mines for his own personal wealth, deliberately engineering the treasury's collapse. By creating a crisis that the Queen cannot solve on her own, he has placed himself in the position of the most important man in Dulcia. His original plan was to marry the Queen himself, thus becoming king. But the Queen has never shown romantic interest in him, and so Preminger has been forced to reconsider his strategy. When the arrangement with King Dominic is announced, Preminger sees a new threat to his ambitions. If Anneliese marries Dominic and the kingdoms unite, Preminger's influence may be diluted or eliminated entirely. He begins devising a new, more dangerous plan, one that involves getting rid of Princess Anneliese entirely before the marriage can take place. He is aided in his scheming by two bumbling and incompetent henchmen named Nick and Knack, who provide much of the film's comic relief. They are loyal to Preminger in a simple-minded way, following his orders without fully understanding the stakes, and frequently making mistakes that frustrate their master while delighting the audience. Despite their ineptitude, they serve as useful tools for Preminger's increasingly desperate plots. The meeting that changes everything. One afternoon, unable to bear the suffocating pressure of palace life any longer, Princess Anneliese slips away from her royal duties and wanders into the town. She wants to breathe fresh air, feel the cobblestones beneath her feet, and simply exist as a person rather than a princess for a few precious moments. Serafina, her loyal cat, follows close behind, keeping a watchful and slightly nervous eye on her mistress. In the town market, Anneliese finds herself drawn to the sound of a beautiful voice coming from inside a seamstress shop. She peeks through the window and sees Erika singing as she works, her voice carrying a melody of longing and hope. Anneliese is moved by the music and by the young woman performing it. She slips inside the shop, and the two come face to face. The moment they see each other, both women freeze. The resemblance between them is complete and utterly astonishing. They could be twins separated at birth. Same face, same hair color, same height, every physical feature perfectly mirrored. They are identical in appearance in every conceivable way, despite one being a princess and the other a commoner. For a long, stunned moment they simply stare at each other, not knowing what to say, but the shock quickly gives way to delight and laughter. There is an immediate, effortless connection between Anneliese and Erika. They talk quickly and excitedly, discovering that despite their completely different lives they share so much in common: a longing for freedom, a love of music, a desire to be seen as more than what their circumstances have defined them as. Anneliese envies Erika's ability to move through the world without the weight of royal expectation. Erika envies Anneliese's security and comfort. Each sees in the other something she herself lacks. Their friendship is formed instantly and sincerely. Though they come from opposite ends of society, they understand each other in a way that very few people in their respective lives have ever managed. From this moment forward, their fates are inextricably linked. Chapter 4: Julian and the Heart of the Palace. Back at the palace, we are introduced more fully to Julian, who serves as Princess Anneliese's royal tutor. Julian is a gentle, intelligent, and deeply principled young man. He has educated Anneliese in science, literature, history, and the arts, and over time their relationship has grown far beyond the bounds of teacher and student. Julian deeply admires Anneliese, not for her royal title or her beauty, but for her extraordinary mind, her curiosity, and her genuine goodness of heart. He has fallen in love with her quietly, choosing not to act on his feelings because he believes the distance between a royal princess and a common tutor is too great a barrier to cross. Julian watches as Anneliese is steered toward the marriage with King Dominic, and he says nothing, even though his heart is breaking. He devotes himself entirely to her happiness and education, accepting his role as her tutor even as he struggles internally with everything he cannot say. His quiet, patient, and self-sacrificing love for Anneliese is one of the film's most emotionally resonant threads, and it plays a crucial role in everything that follows. Anneliese, for her part, is fond of Julian and values him enormously, but in the early part of the story she has not yet allowed herself to fully understand the depth of what she feels for him. She is too consumed by her anxieties about the arranged marriage and her frustrated longing for freedom to look clearly at what is right in front of her. This emotional blindness is not a flaw but a very human truth. Sometimes we cannot see what we most need until circumstances force us to confront it. Preminger's trap and the kidnapping of Anneliese. With the wedding to King Dominic approaching, Preminger moves his plan into action. He arranges to have Princess Anneliese lured away from the palace under false pretenses, and then has her captured by his henchmen Nick and Knack. Anneliese is taken to a remote cave deep in the hills outside Dulcia, hidden far from the town and the palace, and locked inside. Preminger instructs his men to keep her there and out of sight. Preminger's plan is elegant in its cruelty. With Anneliese gone, the queen will be distraught, and the kingdom thrown into chaos. He intends to present himself as the only person capable of restoring order, positioning himself as Dulcia's savior. He calculates that with Anneliese out of the picture permanently, the queen will have no choice but to depend on him, and that eventually she will be persuaded to allow him the power he craves, or that he will simply seize it by force when the moment is right. At the palace, the disappearance of the princess causes panic. The queen is devastated and frightened. The royal guards search the city and the surrounding countryside, but find nothing. Julian is beside himself with grief and refuses to accept that Anneliese is simply gone. He begins his own private search, driven by love and loyalty, determined to find her no matter what it takes. Preminger, meanwhile, watches the chaos he has created with cold satisfaction. He controls the flow of information at court, steering the search in wrong directions, delaying any serious investigation, and using the crisis to expand his own influence. He moves closer to the Queen, offering comfort and counsel while privately orchestrating her kingdom's destruction. Chapter 6. Erika steps into the princess's shoes. When word reaches Erika that Princess Anneliese has gone missing, she is deeply alarmed. She and Anneliese had become true friends in the short time since their meeting, and Erika is genuinely frightened for her friend's safety. At the same time, she is approached by those at the palace who are desperately trying to conceal the princess's disappearance from King Dominic's arriving entourage. If Dominic discovers that the princess he has come to marry is missing, the alliance will collapse, the financial deal will fall apart, and Dulcia will face immediate ruin. The plan is proposed. Erika, who is identical to Anneliese in every physical way, should impersonate the princess until Anneliese can be found. Erika is terrified. She is a common seamstress girl who has spent her entire life working with her hands. She knows nothing of royal protocol, courtly etiquette, or the complex social rituals of palace life. The idea of pretending to be a princess before an entire royal court seems utterly impossible. But Erika cares about her friend deeply, and she understands what is at stake for the people of Dulcia. Setting aside her fear, she agrees to take on the role. Serafina and Wolfie help coach her in the basics of royal behavior: how to walk, how to speak, how to hold herself, how to respond to courtiers. It is a chaotic and often comic process, with Erika making one small slip after another before gradually finding her footing. When she finally steps into the palace as Princess Anneliese, the court accepts her without suspicion. The physical resemblance is so perfect that no one questions her identity. Erika navigates the palace with growing confidence, learning quickly and adapting with natural intelligence and charm. Inside, she is deeply uncomfortable with the deception she is carrying out, but she holds herself together out of love for her friend and concern for the kingdom. King Dominic, not who anyone expected before Erika began her impersonation. Both she and the real Anneliese had assumed King Dominic would be cold, arrogant, and self-important, the typical image of a powerful king interested only in political alliances and personal prestige. This assumption is shattered almost immediately upon his arrival. King Dominic is not cold at all. He is warm, thoughtful, self-deprecating, and genuinely kind. He arrives at the palace with a quiet ease and a sense of humor that immediately disarms everyone around him. He is clearly uncomfortable with excessive pomp and formality, preferring honest conversation to grand ceremony. He is the kind of person who listens carefully when others speak, who asks questions because he is genuinely curious, and who shows consideration for the feelings of those around him regardless of their social rank. As Erika spends time with Dominic, attending dinners, walking in the palace gardens, engaging in long conversations, she finds herself genuinely liking him. Their interactions are natural and easy in a way she never expected. He makes her laugh. He respects her intelligence. He does not treat her as a prize to be won or a problem to be managed, but as a real person whose thoughts and feelings matter. For Erika, who has spent most of her life being treated as little more than a servant by Madame Carp, this simple act of being genuinely seen and valued is profoundly moving. The problem, of course, is that Dominic thinks she is Princess Anneliese. He is falling for a woman whose name and identity are not truly her own. Erika knows this. Every warm exchange between them is shadowed by the knowledge that she is deceiving him, and that when the truth eventually comes out, as it must, everything she is feeling will be put at risk. But she cannot stop herself. Something real is growing between them, and she does not know how to deny it. While all of this unfolds at the palace, Princess Anneliese is imprisoned in the cave where Preminger's henchmen left her. The cave is dark, damp, and isolated. There is no obvious way out, and no one knows she is there. For a while, Anneliese is frightened and alone, unsure of what has happened or why, uncertain of whether anyone will ever find her. But Anneliese is not the kind of person who surrenders to despair. She is intellectually driven and practically minded, and she begins studying her surroundings with a scientist's careful eye. She examines the walls of the cave, the flow of underground water, the structure of the rock formations. She thinks systematically about potential escape routes and keeps herself mentally active rather than allowing fear to overwhelm her. It is Julian who finds her, driven by love and stubbornness in equal measure. While the official palace search operates under Preminger's misdirection, Julian follows his own instincts and pursues every lead, no matter how small. He refuses to believe that Anneliese has simply vanished. He knows her too well, knows her intelligence, her resilience, and the fact that she would never leave the kingdom of her own will at such a critical moment. Something terrible has happened to her, and he is determined to find out what. When Julian finally locates Anneliese in the cave, the reunion is deeply emotional. She is relieved and grateful beyond words. He is overwhelmed by the fact that she is safe. They work together to try to find a way out of the cave, and in doing so they are forced into a new kind of closeness. Stripped of the formal roles of tutor and princess, they are simply two people navigating a dangerous situation together, relying entirely on each other. In the quiet hours of the cave, with no royal court to observe them and no social rules to enforce distance between them, Anneliese and Julian begin to speak openly for perhaps the first time. She tells him about her fears regarding the arranged marriage. He tells her, at last, what he has held back for so long, that he loves her, not as a tutor loves a student, but as a man loves a woman he admires with his whole heart. The declaration, offered not in the grand setting of a ballroom, but in the quiet intimacy of a dark cave, is one of the film's most genuinely moving moments. And Anneliese, who has been searching her whole life for something she could not name, finally understands that what she has been looking for was standing beside her all along. Erika uncovers the truth back at the palace. Erika is not simply playing the role of a princess and waiting passively for events to resolve themselves. She is sharp, observant, and deeply unsettled by what she is beginning to notice. Small things do not add up. Conversations she overhears, documents she glimpses, the behavior of certain palace staff, all of it points towards something being deliberately hidden. As she continues to investigate quietly and carefully, the picture begins to come together. Erika discovers evidence pointing toward Preminger's long-running scheme to steal the kingdom's gold and engineer its financial collapse. She finds clues suggesting that Anneliese's disappearance was not an accident or a voluntary departure but a deliberate abduction orchestrated by Preminger himself. The more she learns, the more she understands the full scope of the threat facing the kingdom and her friend. Erika is now in an extraordinarily dangerous position. She is a commoner impersonating a princess inside the very palace where the villain operates. She has no official authority, no army, and no political standing. If Preminger discovers that she is not the real princess, her life will be in immediate danger. And yet she cannot simply do nothing. Anneliese is out there somewhere, and Dulcia is being destroyed from within by a man who has deceived everyone around him. She begins to gather what evidence she can, moving carefully and trusting almost no one. Her relationship with Dominic deepens during this time, and the warmth between them becomes both a comfort and a source of anguish. She knows she cannot tell him the truth yet, not until Anneliese is safe. But every moment she spends with him while maintaining the deception feels harder than the last. Chapter 10. Preminger's plan begins to unravel as Erika works to expose Preminger from the inside. Julian and Anneliese are working to escape from the outside. The cave holds them longer than either hopes, But Anneliese's scientific mind eventually identifies a structural weakness in one of the cave's walls near an underground water source. With Julian's help, she is able to use this knowledge to force open a passage, and the two of them make their way out into the open air. Their escape is not clean or easy. Preminger's henchmen, Nick and Knack, are still patrolling the area outside the cave and discover that the princess has escaped. They give chase, and a frantic pursuit follows across the Dulcian countryside. But Nick and Knack's essential incompetence works in Anneliese and Julian's favor, and the two manage to evade capture and make their way back toward the town and the palace. Meanwhile, Preminger, feeling the walls beginning to close around him, accelerates his timeline. He has realized that the investigation into Anneliese's disappearance is getting closer to the truth. He begins making bolder, more aggressive moves to secure his position, including attempting to manipulate the Queen more directly and pushing to accelerate any political arrangements that would give him formal authority in Dulcia's governance. His behavior becomes erratic and his mask of cultured respectability begins to slip in small but telling ways. Erika, watching all of this from her position inside the palace, chooses her moment carefully. She has assembled everything she needs: the evidence, the witnesses, the truth about the gold. She is afraid, but she has grown enormously over the course of her time at the palace. She is no longer the overwhelmed seamstress girl who first stepped through the palace gates. She has grown into something formidable, a young woman who knows her own worth and is willing to fight for what is right. Confrontation and the moment of truth. The climax of the film arrives when all the converging storylines finally collide. Anneliese and Julian reach the palace. Erika, who has gathered her evidence and prepared herself emotionally, moves to confront Preminger at the moment she judges to be most critical. The tension in the palace is enormous, with the Queen, King Dominic, the court, and Preminger all present in the same space. Preminger, cornered and desperate, makes one final attempt to seize control. He attempts to assert his accusations, dismiss the evidence against him, and use his long-established position of trust to outmaneuver those who have uncovered his crimes. For a brief and terrible moment it seems possible that his boldness might actually work, that his years of carefully cultivated influence might be enough to override the truth. But then Anneliese arrives. The real princess, alive and returned, steps into the room. The shock on Preminger's face is complete and devastating. He had counted on her never being found. The entire carefully constructed edifice of his plan collapses in a single moment. Erika and Anneliese stand side by side, the princess and the girl who stood in for her, and together they present everything they know. The stolen gold is confirmed. Preminger's conspiracy is laid bare before the entire court. Preminger attempts one last desperate move, but he is outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The guard seize him. His henchmen Nick and Knack, characteristically bumbling at the worst possible moment for their master, fail to provide any meaningful assistance. Preminger is taken into custody, his scheme destroyed, his power stripped from him completely. Justice arrives firmly and without mercy for the man who has spent years working to destroy everything Dulcia stood for. Chapter 12 Resolution: Love, Freedom, and a New Beginning. With Preminger defeated and the truth fully revealed, the final chapter of the story belongs to the heart. There are several resolutions to untangle, and the film handles each of them with genuine warmth and emotional intelligence. The most pressing matter is the arranged marriage. Now that Anneliese is safe and the deception has been fully exposed, King Dominic learns the truth: that the woman he has been spending time with, the woman he has been falling in love with, is not Princess Anneliese at all but Erika, a seamstress girl from the town. The revelation is a significant moment. Dominic could be angry, could feel deceived and humiliated. But this is not who he is. Instead, He is honest about what he knows to be true in his heart, that his feelings are real, and they belong to Erika, regardless of who she is or where she comes from. His love for her is not based on her title but on her character, her wit, her warmth, and her bravery. He tells her this plainly and without reservation. Erika, who has been carrying the guilt of the deception throughout the entire story, is moved beyond words. She had been prepared to lose him when the truth came out. Instead, she finds that the truth is exactly what he needed to hear. Their relationship, built on genuine connection rather than pretense, survives the revelation and emerges stronger for it. For Anneliese and Julian, the resolution is equally powerful. Anneliese makes her own feelings known openly, and without the constraints that royal protocol had always imposed on her. She does not want a king she was assigned to marry. She wants Julian, the man who risked everything to find her, who sat with her in the dark and told her the truth about his heart. The queen, who has always loved her daughter and who has been through enough heartbreak to know that genuine happiness is more valuable than political convenience, accepts this with grace. The arranged marriage to Dominic is dissolved in the most amicable possible way, by mutual agreement between two people who have both found someone else. The fate of Erika's debt to Madame Carp is also resolved. One of the great injustices of Erika's life, the fact that she was essentially imprisoned by a financial obligation she never chose, is addressed directly. With her connection to the royal court now established and her bravery in exposing Preminger recognized by everyone, the debt that Madame Carp has used to control her life is cancelled. Erika walks out of that seamstress shop for the last time, free in every sense of the word, free from debt, free from servitude, free to go wherever life takes her. The two young women who found each other by accident, a princess and a pauper, identical in face but different in everything else, stand together as the story closes. They have each found their own version of the freedom they always dreamed of. Anneliese has found love and the right to make her own choices. Erika has found love and liberation from a life that was never fair to her. And together they have helped save a kingdom, exposed a villain, and proven that the most important thing about a person is not the circumstances of their birth but the quality of their character. The film ends on a note of pure, uncomplicated joy. The kingdom of Dulcia is safe. The treasury will recover now that Preminger's stolen gold is returned. The people celebrate. And 4 individuals, a princess, a pauper, a tutor, and a king, each begin the next chapter of their lives with open hearts and the knowledge that they found exactly what they were looking for. There is the complete, lengthy story of Barbie as the princess and the pauper, broken into 12 full chapters covering every part of the narrative from start to finish. Here is what each chapter covers. Chapter 1 introduces the kingdom of Dulcia, Princess Anneliese trapped in royal life, and Erika trapped in servitude. Chapter 2 exposes Preminger's dark conspiracy behind the kingdom's financial collapse. Chapter 3 covers the remarkable first meeting between Anneliese and Erika. Chapter 4 digs into Julian's quiet, unrequited love for the princess. Chapter 5 details Preminger's kidnapping of Anneliese. Chapter 6 follows Erika as she steps into the princess's role out of friendship. Chapter 7 reveals King Dominic's true warm and genuine character. Chapter 8 covers Anneliese's imprisonment in the cave and Julian finding her, including their emotional confession to each other. Chapter 9 shows Erika piecing together the truth about Preminger from inside the palace. Chapter 10 follows both escape and exposure as the two storylines race toward each other. Chapter 11 brings the full confrontation and Preminger's downfall. Chapter 12 resolves every storyline: Erika and Dominic, Anneliese and Julian, the cancelled debt, and the freedom both women finally find. Growing up in British Columbia, Kelly Sheridan was born on September 19, 1977, in Fort St. James, a small town in the northern interior of British Columbia, Canada. She grew up in a part of Canada that is far removed from the entertainment industry hubs of Vancouver or Toronto, but from a very young age she showed a natural inclination toward performance, storytelling, and music. Her childhood was shaped by the quiet, somewhat remote landscape of northern British Columbia, which may have contributed to the rich inner imaginative life that would later serve her so well as a voice performer. Sheridan developed an interest in acting during her school years and eventually pursued formal training in the performing arts. She moved toward Vancouver, which serves as Canada's primary hub for film and television production and is the city where a significant portion of North American animation is produced. This move placed her at the center of the Canadian voice acting industry at exactly the right time in her career. Career beginnings breaking into voice acting, Sheridan began her professional career in the late 1990s, taking on a variety of roles in animated series and television productions that were being produced out of Vancouver. The city at that time was experiencing a significant boom in animation production, with studios like Mainframe Entertainment, which would later produce the Barbie animated film series, operating at full capacity and constantly seeking talented voice performers. Sheridan proved herself quickly as a versatile and expressive voice actress capable of conveying a wide range of emotions and character types. Her early television work included appearances in various animated series, building up a professional profile and establishing relationships with producers and directors who would become important collaborators throughout her career. She was known among industry colleagues for her professionalism, her ability to take direction, and her natural warmth, all of which made her a frequent choice for prominent roles in animation. The Barbie franchise becoming the voice of Barbie. Kelly Sheridan's life and career changed fundamentally when she was cast as the voice of Barbie in the animated film series produced by Mainframe Entertainment. The first film in the series, Barbie and the Nutcracker, was released in 2001, and Sheridan delivered a performance that immediately established the tone and character of Barbie in animation: warm, brave, intelligent, and emotionally present. The film was a significant commercial success and launched one of the most enduring direct-to-video animated franchises in history. Sheridan went on to voice the lead character in multiple subsequent Barbie films, including Barbie as Rapunzel in 2002, Barbie of Swan Lake in 2003, and then the landmark Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper in 2004. The Princess and the Pauper represented the most ambitious and technically demanding Barbie film to that point, as it required Sheridan to voice two completely distinct main characters, Princess Anneliese and Erika, each with her own personality, emotional arc, and vocal singing style. Performing both roles in a single production required Sheridan to create clear differentiation between the two characters while keeping both performances equally vibrant and believable. Her ability to pull this off is widely regarded as one of the film's greatest achievements. Anneliese and Erika sound and feel like two genuinely different people despite being voiced by the same woman. Anneliese carries a slightly more formal, measured quality, the result of a life lived under royal scrutiny. Erika is freer, more impulsive, more openly joyful in her expression. These are not simply two versions of the same voice but two distinct artistic creations, and Sheridan's skill in crafting both is remarkable. She continued voicing Barbie in numerous films that followed, including Barbie and the Magic of Pegasus, Barbie and the Diamond Castle, Barbie as the Island Princess, and many others throughout the 2000s. Her voice became synonymous with the character for an entire generation of children worldwide, and her contributions to the franchise are considered foundational to its identity and its enormous global success. Broader career and legacy beyond Barbie. Outside of the Barbie franchise, Sheridan maintained an active career in animation, lending her voice to characters in various television series and other productions. She is known within the animation industry as a highly dependable professional with exceptional range and an ability to bring genuine emotional depth to animated characters. Her work across the Barbie film series alone represents one of the most substantial contributions any single voice actor has made to a long-running animated franchise in the history of the medium. Sheridan is held in extremely high regard by fans of the Barbie animated films, many of whom are now adults who grew up with her voice as a defining part of their childhoods. The warmth and intelligence she brought to the character of Barbie across more than a decade of films established a version of the character that millions of viewers carry with them as a genuine emotional memory. Her work on The Princess and the Pauper in particular remains one of the most celebrated voice performances in the entire Barbie catalog. Hamilton, Ontario, and the roots of a performer. Martin Hayter Short was born on March 26, 1950. In Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, the youngest of 5 children in an Irish-Canadian family. His father, Charles Patrick Short, was a senior executive at Stelco, one of Canada's largest steel manufacturers, and his mother, Olive Grace, was a violinist. The Short household was filled with music, warmth, and a strong sense of humor, all of which left deep impressions on the youngest child. Martin Short's childhood was marked by profound personal loss. When he was 12 years old, his brother David was killed in a car accident. Then, when Short was 17, his mother died of cancer. 2 years later, his father also passed away. These losses, experienced during the years when most young people are finding their footing in the world, shaped Short's emotional landscape in ways that would quietly inform his career for decades. Those who know him well have noted that his extraordinary warmth toward the people in his life reflects someone who understands acutely how fragile and precious those connections are. Education and early career. McMaster University and the beginnings of comedy. Short attended McMaster University in Hamilton, where he studied social work, a choice that reflected his sensitivity toward people and his interest in human well-being. However, his passion for performance had been alive since childhood, and university became the place where it truly ignited. He threw himself into student theatrical productions, reviews, and comedy performances, discovering quickly that making an audience laugh was something he was exceptionally gifted at doing. After graduating, he moved to Toronto, which in the 1970s was developing into a genuine hub for Canadian comedy and theatrical performance. He joined the Second City Comedy Troupe, the legendary improvisational comedy institution that has been the training ground for an enormous number of the most important comic performers of the 20th and 21st centuries. At Second City Toronto, Short worked alongside performers including John Candy, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, and Andrea Martin, a group of people who would collectively transform North American comedy over the following decades. Saturday Night Live and national breakthrough. Arriving on the biggest stage in American comedy, Martin Short joined the cast of Saturday Night Live for the 1984 to 1985 season, one of the most celebrated single seasons in the show's long history. He joined alongside other new cast members including Billy Crystal and Christopher Guest, and the three of them, alongside returning members, produced a season of television that is still discussed as one of SNL's finest moments. Short's ability to create fully realized comedic characters with lightning speed, to commit completely to any performance no matter how absurd the premise, and to maintain perfect comic timing made him an immediate standout. During his season on SNL, Short introduced several characters that have become genuine cultural touchstones. Ed Grimley, the enthusiastic, triangle-playing, excitable young man with the distinctive hair spike, had actually originated in Short's Second City work but found a massive national audience on SNL. The character was so beloved that it eventually spawned an animated series of its own. Short also introduced the fictional Hollywood agent Nathan Thurm, a slippery, sweating, defensive character who became an instant classic of the show's character roster. Film and television career. Decades of work across every medium. Following his SNL season, Martin Short built one of the most varied and enduring careers in American entertainment. His film work includes comedies, musicals, dramas, and animated productions spanning 4 decades. He appeared in Three Amigos in 1986 alongside Steve Martin and Chevy Chase, a comedy that has since become a cult classic. He starred in Inner Space in 1987, playing a fast-talking and cowardly character who ultimately finds his courage, a performance that showcased his ability to be genuinely funny while also carrying a character's emotional journey. He starred in The Three Fugitives, Clifford, and Father of the Bride Part 2 during the late 1980s and 1990s, and appeared in Mars Attacks, a Tim Burton ensemble film, in 1996. He played the wedding planner Frank Egelhofer in Father of the Bride in 1991 and its sequel, a performance so beloved that the character became one of the defining comedic creations of that era of American cinema. On Broadway, Short has had a distinguished career, including starring roles in Little Me, The Goodbye Girl, and his one-man show Martin Short, Fame Becomes Me, which ran on Broadway in 2006 and demonstrated his remarkable range as a live performer. His Broadway work earned him a Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical, confirming what those in the entertainment industry had always known, that beneath the comedy was a performer of genuine theatrical depth. In television, Short appeared in numerous specials, variety shows, and series over the decades. He co-starred in the long-running and critically acclaimed comedy series The Morning Show adjacent projects, and maintained consistent television presence through guest appearances and special events. His more recent work includes the hit Hulu comedy series Only Murders in the Building, which he began in 2021 alongside Steve Martin and Selena Gomez. The series has been a major critical and commercial success, earning Short renewed attention and praise from a new generation of viewers who discovered his extraordinary talents through this modern vehicle. Personal life. Nancy Dolman and the love of his life. Martin Short married actress and singer Nancy Dolman in 1980, and their marriage became one of the most quietly celebrated partnerships in show business. Nancy was the anchor of his personal life, warm, grounded, deeply loved. They had 3 children together, all of whom were adopted. By all accounts, their home life was filled with the kind of genuine happiness and stability that is genuinely rare in the entertainment industry. Nancy Dolman was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and after a long and brave illness, she passed away in 2010. Her death was devastating to Short and to everyone who knew them as a couple. In the years since, Short has spoken about Nancy with extraordinary love and tenderness in a way that deeply moved many who heard it. He has described her as the great love of his life, and his continued devotion to her memory has been one of the most touching aspects of his public persona in the years since her passing. He has raised his children while continuing to work at the highest level of his profession, carrying both his grief and his joy with remarkable grace. One of Canada's greatest comic gifts to the world, Martin Short is considered one of the greatest comic performers of his generation by virtually everyone qualified to make such an assessment. His ability to create characters, his physical comedy, his musical talents, his improvisational brilliance, and his sheer warmth as a human being have made him beloved not just by audiences but by every colleague who has ever worked with him. Steve Martin, with whom he has maintained a decades-long friendship and creative partnership, has spoken about Short as the funniest person he has ever known. His contribution to The Princess and the Pauper as the voice of Preminger brought a layer of theatrical richness to the film's villainy that elevated the entire production. Vancouver roots and early performance. Mark Hildreth was born on January 24, 1978, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Growing up in Vancouver placed him at the center of Canada's film and television industry from his earliest years. He demonstrated an interest in performance from a young age, and his natural talent for both acting and music became apparent early. Vancouver's entertainment industry provided opportunities for young performers that few other Canadian cities could match, and Hildreth took full advantage of that environment. As he developed his craft, he pursued acting training and began building a professional career as a young adult, taking on roles in the television productions and films that were being made in the Vancouver area. His work during these early years established him as a reliable and talented actor with a natural screen presence and a voice that was particularly well suited to animation work, acting career, television, film and voice work. Mark Hildreth has built a career that spans live-action television, film, and voice acting across more than 2 decades. His live-action television work includes appearances in series produced in Vancouver, taking advantage of the city's status as a major hub for American and Canadian television production. He has appeared in a wide range of genres, demonstrating versatility as a performer across different types of material. In voice acting, Hildreth became a recognizable presence in animated productions made in Vancouver, and his work on the Barbie film series gave him his most prominent and widely seen animated role. As Julian in The Princess and the Pauper, he delivered a performance that captured the character's quiet, devoted love and his eventual courage in placing that love above his own fear. The singing required for the role also showcased Hildreth's musical abilities, as Julian's vocal moments in the film carry genuine emotional weight. Hildreth is also known for his work in the television series V, the science fiction drama that aired in 2009 and 2010, in which he played a recurring character. The series attracted considerable attention and gave him visibility with a broad international television audience. Throughout his career, he has maintained an active and varied professional life, balancing different types of work across different mediums with consistent dedication to his craft. Music, a singer as well as an actor. Beyond his acting work, Mark Hildreth has pursued music as a serious artistic endeavor. He has released music independently and has performed as a singer-songwriter, bringing the same genuine commitment to his music that characterizes his acting work. His musical sensibility informed his performance in The Princess and the Pauper, where the singing required him to convey not just melody but genuine romantic emotion in a way that served the film's storytelling. His background as a musician made this feel natural rather than effortful, and the result is one of the more emotionally resonant male vocal performances in the Barbie film catalog. An artistic family and a musical foundation. Alessandro Giuliani was born on July 28, 1981, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, into a remarkably artistic family. His father, John Giuliani, was a highly respected Canadian theatre director, actor, and teacher whose influence on Canadian theatre spanned several decades. His mother, Donna Ferrin Giuliani, was also involved in the performing arts. Growing up in a household where theater, music, and artistic expression were central to daily life gave Alessandro an exceptionally rich foundation for his own eventual career as a performer. From a young age, he was immersed in the world of performance, attending rehearsals, watching productions, absorbing the craft of storytelling through every available avenue. This early immersion gave him a level of understanding and comfort with performance that most young actors spend years working to develop. When he eventually pursued acting professionally, he did so from a position of genuine depth rather than beginner's enthusiasm. Career in television and film. From Dulcia to Deep Space. Alessandro Giuliani is perhaps best known to mainstream audiences for his role as Felix Gaeta in the critically acclaimed science fiction television series Battlestar Galactica, which ran from 2004 to 2009. His portrayal of Gaeta, an initially idealistic and competent officer whose arc becomes one of the series' most morally complex and emotionally devastating character journeys, earned him considerable praise and introduced him to a large and devoted international fan base. The role required him to carry a character through radical transformations across multiple seasons, and he did so with a level of commitment and craft that was widely recognized by critics and viewers alike. He has also appeared in the television series Continuum, Arrow, and The 100, among many others, maintaining a consistent presence in the Vancouver-based television production world. His ability to work across genres, science fiction, drama, animation, fantasy, reflects the versatility he developed through his comprehensive artistic upbringing and his rigorous approach to every role he takes on. As King Dominic in The Princess and the Pauper, Giuliani brought an unexpected warmth and genuine humanity to a character who could easily have been written as a simple romantic prop. Instead, his vocal performance made Dominic feel like a real person, someone with a private life and genuine feelings, someone whose love for Erika is earned through honest connection rather than the mechanics of plot. The singing required for the role also benefited from Giuliani's musical background and his natural ease with vocal performance. Musical work, opera, classical music, and the family tradition. True to his artistic family background, Alessandro Giuliani has also pursued musical work as part of his professional life. He has been involved in opera and classical music productions, a somewhat unusual combination with a career in television and animation that speaks to the genuine breadth of his artistic interests. His musical work connects him to a tradition that goes back through his family's long involvement in the performing arts, and it enriches every vocal performance he gives in his acting work. From Calgary to Vancouver's animation studios, Kathleen Barr was born on August 13, 1967, in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She eventually made her way to Vancouver, which was becoming the center of Canadian animation production, and established herself as one of the most prolific and reliable voice actresses in the industry. Her career in voice acting has been extraordinarily extensive. She has appeared in literally hundreds of animated productions across more than 3 decades of professional work, making her one of the most experienced and versatile voice performers in the history of Canadian animation. Barr's ability to create vivid, memorable characters entirely through vocal performance is one of the defining qualities of her career. She has voiced heroes, villains, comedy characters, and emotional dramatic roles, demonstrating a range that few voice actors of any era can match. Her ability to find the specific human truth inside a character, even when that character is animated, fantastical, or exaggerated, is what has made her so consistently sought after by animation directors and producers over such a long period of time. Animation career. A pillar of the Canadian animation industry, Kathleen Barr's animated credits are vast and span the full range of what animation has produced in Canada and North America over the past 30-plus years. She has been a recurring voice in numerous beloved series and films, including work in the My Little Pony franchise, where she has voiced multiple characters across different iterations of the series. She has appeared in Dragon Tales, Voltron, Johnny Test, Transformers, Mega Man, Monster High, and an enormous variety of other productions that have collectively reached audiences of hundreds of millions of children worldwide. As Madame Carp in The Princess and the Pauper, Barr created a villain of wonderfully unpleasant specificity. Madame Carp is cold, mercenary, and deeply petty, a small-scale villain whose cruelty is all the more realistic precisely because it operates at the level of everyday economic exploitation rather than grand dramatic scheming. Barr gave the character a sharp, clipped vocal quality that communicated perfectly the kind of person who finds satisfaction in holding power over someone who cannot fight back. It is a masterful piece of character work delivered with precise economy, Montreal beginnings and the path to performance. Tabitha St. Germain was born on December 17, 1964, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and grew up in a bilingual cultural environment that gave her early exposure to multiple languages and the communicative richness that comes with navigating different ways of speaking and expressing oneself. She developed a passion for performance from an early age and pursued acting as her professional path, eventually making her way to Vancouver, where the heart of Canada's animation and film industries was centered. St. Germain is known professionally under the name Tabitha St. Germain, though she has also worked under the name Paulina Gillis. Her career in voice acting has spanned decades and has made her one of the most recognized voices in Canadian animation, beloved by multiple generations of children who have grown up with the characters she has brought to life. Voice acting career. Decades of beloved characters. Tabitha St. Germain's voice acting career is one of the most celebrated in Canadian animation history. She has voiced an extraordinary number of characters across a vast range of productions, with a particular prominence in properties that have reached global audiences. She is perhaps most widely known among a younger generation for her work in My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, in which she voiced multiple recurring characters including Rarity in certain episodes, Luna, and many others, a body of work that has made her a beloved figure in the My Little Pony fan community worldwide. Her earlier career included extensive work in animated series and direct-to-video productions from the 1990s and 2000s, including multiple appearances in the Barbie animated film series. Her ability to voice characters with distinctive personalities, whether comedic, regal, warm, or eccentric, has made her one of the most versatile performers in the industry. As Seraphina in The Princess and the Pauper, she delivered a performance that was simultaneously elegant and funny, giving the narrating cat a personality that felt distinctly feline in the best possible way, observant, slightly superior, deeply loyal, and endlessly entertaining. Her live-action work has also included television appearances over the years, though it is her voice work for which she is most widely celebrated. Within the animation industry in Vancouver, she is regarded as one of the most talented and reliable voice performers working in the field, with a career that shows no signs of diminishing in scope or quality. A long and distinguished career in Canadian entertainment. Pam Hyatt is a Canadian actress with a long and distinguished career that spans both live action and voice acting work. She has been active in the Canadian entertainment industry across several decades, bringing her experience and craft to an enormous range of productions over the course of her professional life. Her voice acting career has been particularly extensive, with credits across numerous animated series and films produced in Canada. In the Canadian animation world, Hyatt is a well-known figure whose voice is recognizable to anyone who has watched Canadian-produced animation from the 1980s through the 2000s. She has appeared in productions ranging from children's animated series to more dramatic animated works, demonstrating a range that encompasses both comedy and genuine emotional depth. As the Queen in The Princess and the Pauper, Hyatt brought a regal warmth and maternal weight to a character who could easily have been a simple plot device. Instead, her performance made the Queen feel like a genuinely loving mother caught between impossible circumstances, someone who is causing her daughter pain not out of cruelty, but out of desperate love for the people of a kingdom she is trying to save. This nuance elevated every scene the Queen appeared in and gave the story's central conflict a real emotional foundation. From British Columbia to the animation booth. Brian Drummond was born on August 10, 1969, in Salmon Arm, British Columbia, Canada. He grew up in British Columbia and eventually made his way into the entertainment industry through Vancouver's thriving production community. His career in voice acting has been both extensive and extremely varied, spanning more than 3 decades of work across animated series, direct-to-video productions, and video games. Drummond is recognized within the Canadian animation community as one of the most skilled and prolific voice actors of his generation. He has the ability to voice characters across an exceptionally wide range, from menacing and intimidating villains to warm and comedic characters, with equal facility. This range has made him one of the most consistently employed voice actors in the Vancouver market throughout his career. Notable roles in animation work. Decades of animated characters. Among Drummond's best-known roles is Vegeta in the Ocean Group English dub of Dragon Ball Z, one of the most iconic villain-turned-anti-hero characters in the history of anime. His portrayal of Vegeta, proud, fierce, driven by an obsessive rivalry, gave the character a particular intensity that resonated deeply with a global audience of Dragon Ball Z fans. It is a role that cemented his status as a major presence in the dubbing and animation world, and one that fans of the series have continued to celebrate long after the original dub's completion. Beyond Dragon Ball Z, Drummond has appeared in hundreds of animated productions, including numerous series and direct-to-video films produced in Vancouver. His work spans genres from action and science fiction to comedy and family animation, and his ability to serve whatever a given character needs, humor, menace, warmth, sorrow, has made him a director's favorite across many different types of production. As Wolfie in The Princess and the Pauper, Drummond delivered a performance full of good-natured humor and canine enthusiasm, creating a perfect comic counterpart to Tabitha St. Germain's more refined Serafina. The chemistry between the two narrating animals gave the film much of its lighthearted energy, and Drummond's instinctive timing and natural warmth made Wolfie an immediately lovable presence from his very first scene. There are the complete, lengthy life histories of all the major voice actors from Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper. Here is a quick summary of who is covered and what makes each story remarkable. Kelly Sheridan's story traces her journey from a small town in northern British Columbia to becoming the defining voice of Barbie for an entire generation, including the extraordinary dual-role performance in this very film. Martin Short's biography is perhaps the most emotionally layered, a comedy legend from Hamilton, Ontario, whose childhood was marked by profound loss, whose career spans SNL, Broadway, Hollywood, and Only Murders in the Building, and whose love for his late wife Nancy Dolman remains one of the most moving personal stories in all of entertainment. Alessandro Giuliani comes from a deeply artistic family, and became famous for his emotionally complex role in Battlestar Galactica. Mark Hildreth is a Vancouver-born actor and singer-songwriter whose quiet talent made Julian one of the most genuinely moving romantic leads in the Barbie series. Kathleen Barr is one of the most prolific voice actresses in Canadian animation history, having voiced hundreds of characters across decades. Tabitha St. Germain is celebrated by multiple generations of fans, most notably for My Little Pony, and brought elegance and humor to Serafina. Pam Hyatt is a veteran of Canadian entertainment who gave the Queen genuine maternal depth. And Brian Drummond, the voice behind Dragon Ball Z's Vegeta, brought warmth and perfect comic timing to Wolfie. Mark Twain and his world. The film draws its foundational concept from The Prince and the Pauper, a novel written by the American author Samuel Langhorne Clemens, who published under the pen name Mark Twain. The novel was published in 1881, making it one of Twain's earlier major works, predating both Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Twain wrote the novel during one of the most intellectually fertile periods of his career, when he was living in Hartford, Connecticut, and was deeply engaged with questions of social class, political power, and human identity. Mark Twain was born in 1835 in Florida, Missouri, and grew up in Hannibal, Missouri, along the Mississippi River. His childhood was shaped by the social realities of pre-Civil War America, a world where the brutal institution of slavery coexisted with professed ideals of freedom and human dignity. This fundamental contradiction between what American society claimed to believe and what it actually practiced became one of the driving forces of Twain's literary life. He was a satirist, a moralist, and a humanist, and his work consistently challenged the comforting myths that powerful people told themselves about the social order. By the time he wrote The Prince and the Pauper, Twain had already established himself as a major literary voice. The novel was deliberately set in Tudor England, specifically during the reign of King Edward VI in the 16th century, which allowed Twain to examine the arbitrary and irrational nature of inherited privilege at a safe historical distance. The setting in England also gave the story the feel of a fairy tale or a historical romance, making it accessible to younger readers while carrying sharp social commentary beneath its surface. The original novel's argument, the core argument of Twain's novel, is deceptively simple but profoundly radical. A person's identity, character, and fundamental humanity are not determined by the circumstances of their birth. The Prince of Wales and the pauper boy Tom Canty are physically identical, a fact that the novel uses not merely as a plot device but as a philosophical statement. If two people who are physically the same can end up in such radically different circumstances, then the differences between their lives are entirely the product of social construction, not of any inherent or natural hierarchy. One boy is treated as a god simply because he was born to a certain family. The other is treated as less than human simply because he was not. Twain used the identity swap premise to expose the reader to the full brutality of how the poor were treated in 16th century England. When the prince lives as a pauper, he witnesses floggings, imprisonment for debt, starvation, and the casual cruelty with which the powerful dismissed the suffering of the powerless. These scenes were not invented by Twain. They were drawn from his extensive historical research into Tudor England and were meant to shock the comfortable Victorian reader into confronting the reality of economic inequality. The novel is ultimately a work of social protest disguised as a children's adventure story. The novel had an enormous influence on popular culture after its publication and went through many adaptations across stage, film, and later television and animation over the following century and a half. The identity swap premise became one of the most adaptable storytelling frameworks in Western culture, appearing in hundreds of productions across every conceivable genre and medium. Each new adaptation brought the premise into conversation with its own historical moment, using the swap to comment on whatever social divisions were most pressing for its contemporary audience. How the film adapts and transforms the source Barbie as the princess, and the pauper makes several significant changes to Twain's original premise that are worth examining carefully because they reveal a great deal about the cultural values the film was designed to communicate. The most fundamental change is gender. In Twain's novel, the protagonists are boys. In the film, they are young women. This is not a superficial change, but a philosophically significant one. By making the central characters female, the film redirects Twain's original critique of class inequality toward a conversation about the constraints placed on women by social expectation, economic dependency, and the institution of arranged marriage. Princess Anneliese is not just trapped by her royal status in the way that Twain's prince is trapped by royal obligation. She is specifically constrained by the gendered expectation that she will be married to a man she does not love in order to solve a financial problem that is not of her making. Her captivity is both royal and female. She is expected to sacrifice her personal autonomy and her intellectual ambitions on the altar of dynastic necessity. This is a very specific form of constraint that has no real equivalent in Twain's original novel, and that speaks directly to historical realities about how women of all social classes were treated throughout most of recorded European history. Erika's situation similarly transforms the class critique of the original. Her indentured servitude to Madame Carp is a form of economic bondage that was historically applied to poor women in ways that differed significantly from the bondage applied to poor men. Women who could not pay their debts had very few options. They could not simply take to the road as adventurers the way that poor men in literature often did. They were tied to domestic service, to textile production, to the spaces that society designated as appropriate for women of their class. Erika's situation in the film reflects this historical reality with a degree of specificity that gives the story genuine weight beyond its fairy tale surface. Medieval European feudalism and its social structure. The kingdom of Dulcia, the fictional setting of the film, is modeled on the idealized version of a medieval European kingdom that has been a staple of Western fairy tales and romantic literature for centuries. Understanding the actual historical reality of medieval European society helps illuminate both what the film draws on and what it deliberately softens or romanticizes for its audience. Medieval European society was organized around a rigid hierarchical system known as feudalism, which reached its peak between approximately the 9th and 15th centuries across most of Western and Central Europe. Under feudalism, land was the primary source of wealth and power, and society was organized into a strict set of ranks from the monarch at the top down through the nobility, the clergy, the merchant class, and the peasantry at the bottom. Each rank owed service and loyalty to those above it, and held authority over those below it. Social mobility was extremely limited. The class into which a person was born was almost always the class in which they would die. The kingdom in the film reflects this structure clearly. The queen holds absolute authority. Preminger, as a royal advisor, occupies the upper tier of the nobility. Madame Carp, as a merchant and artisan, occupies the middle tier. Erika, as an indentured worker, occupies the lowest tier of free society. Each of these positions carries specific historical resonance. The film is not entirely inventing its social world but drawing on genuine historical archetypes that would have been familiar to children who had encountered fairy tales, history lessons, or other medieval-themed stories. Arranged marriage and women in medieval society. The arranged marriage at the center of the film's plot is one of its most historically grounded elements. Arranged marriages between royal families were not merely common in medieval and early modern Europe. They were the primary diplomatic tool through which kingdoms managed their relationships with one another. Marriage alliances could end wars, create trade agreements, unite territories, and produce heirs who combined the bloodlines and therefore the legitimacy claims of two different dynasties. For the women involved in these arrangements, their feelings and preferences were largely irrelevant from the perspective of the political system that organized their lives. Royal daughters were assets, valuable pieces on a political chessboard whose movements were decided by fathers, advisors, and eventually by the monarchs themselves. The question of whether a princess loved or even liked the man she was to marry was considered a secondary concern at best and an irrelevance at worst. The film's portrayal of Anneliese's distress at facing this situation is not melodramatic. It reflects a genuine and historically documented form of suffering that countless real women endured across centuries of European history. The specific framing in the film, where the marriage is arranged specifically to resolve a financial crisis, also has strong historical roots. Kingdoms frequently fell into debt, and one of the most common solutions was to arrange a marriage that would bring wealth or resources from another kingdom. The daughters of financially struggling aristocratic and royal families were routinely married off to wealthier families as part of economic agreements. The human cost of this practice, the women who were traded like financial instruments, is exactly what the film brings to the surface of its story. Debt bondage and economic servitude. Erika's situation as an indentured worker held in bondage by debt is drawn from a long and genuinely dark historical tradition. Debt bondage, the practice of requiring a person to work for a creditor to repay a debt, has existed in virtually every human society at various points in history and was particularly common in medieval and early modern Europe. The specific mechanism shown in the film, where Erika's family debt was passed on to her as a child and is perpetually extended by Madame Carp to ensure she can never actually become free, reflects real historical practices that were used by employers and creditors to trap workers in permanent servitude. The textile and garment industry, represented in the film by Madame Carp's seamstress shop, was historically one of the primary sectors in which women of the lower classes were employed in medieval and early modern Europe. Cloth production, sewing, and embroidery were considered appropriate work for women of limited means, and workshops and shops like the one depicted in the film were genuinely common in medieval European towns. The conditions in many of these workshops were exploitative, with workers being paid very little, charged for the materials they used, and kept in circumstances that prevented them from saving enough to improve their situations. The gold mine and economic corruption, the film's central economic crisis, the mysteriously depleted royal gold mines, and its eventual revelation as the result of deliberate theft by a corrupt advisor also has strong historical roots. The management and exploitation of mineral resources was a central concern of medieval European kingdoms. Gold and silver mines were enormously valuable sources of royal revenue, and their output directly determined the wealth and military capacity of the kingdoms that controlled them. Corruption among royal advisors and administrators was a persistent problem throughout medieval European history. The concentration of power in the hands of a small number of people who managed royal finances created both the opportunity and the temptation for embezzlement and self-enrichment at the kingdom's expense. History is full of examples of trusted advisors who used their proximity to power to steal from the very institutions they were supposed to serve. Preminger's scheme, while dramatized for a family audience, reflects a type of corruption that was genuinely common and genuinely devastating for the kingdoms and populations that suffered from it. The early 2000s and the evolution of the princess narrative. Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper was released in 2004, a moment when the cultural conversation about how stories depicted female characters, particularly in children's media, was actively evolving. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw a significant shift in how animated films and television programs approached female protagonists. The earlier model of the passive princess waiting to be rescued was giving way to a new model that emphasized female agency, intelligence, friendship, and the ability to shape one's own destiny. This shift was the product of broader cultural changes, the continued growth of second and third wave feminist ideas into mainstream culture, the increasing recognition that children's media had a genuine influence on how young viewers understood gender roles, and the commercial discovery that audiences of all ages responded powerfully and positively to female characters who were active, capable, and emotionally complex. Studios and production companies that had been slow to change began recognizing that the old passive princess model was both culturally outdated and commercially limiting. The Barbie animated film series, beginning in 2001, was a direct response to this cultural moment. Mattel was acutely aware that the Barbie brand was associated in many people's minds with a narrow and sometimes criticized vision of femininity. The animated films were a deliberate attempt to associate Barbie with a different set of values: courage, intelligence, friendship, artistic talent, and the willingness to act on one's own convictions. The Princess and the Pauper represents the fullest expression of this ambition in the early part of the series, with both female protagonists being not just active but genuinely heroic in their different ways. Female friendship as the emotional core, one of the most culturally significant aspects of the Princess, and the Pauper is its elevation of female friendship to the absolute center of the narrative. The bond between Anneliese and Erika is not a subplot or a supporting element. It is the foundation on which the entire story rests. The two women meet, recognize each other as kindred spirits despite their radically different circumstances, form a genuine friendship, make sacrifices for each other, and ultimately secure each other's freedom. This relationship is more central to the emotional structure of the film than either of the two romantic storylines. This was culturally significant in 2004 because stories that placed female friendship at the center of their narrative, rather than treating female relationships as competitive, rivalrous, or subordinate to the central romance, were still relatively unusual in mainstream children's animation. The dominant model in many popular animated films of the preceding decades positioned female characters primarily in relation to male characters, with female-to-female relationships often being defined by competition over male attention or by mentor and pupil dynamics rather than genuine peer friendship. The Princess and the Pauper explicitly rejects this model. Anneliese and Erika do not compete. They do not misunderstand each other. They support, protect, and ultimately liberate each other. The film communicates very clearly to its young audience that a friendship between two women can be one of the most powerful and meaningful relationships in a person's life, more immediately important, in many ways, than the romantic relationships that the story also celebrates. Class, privilege, and the mirror of identity. The device of making Anneliese and Erika physically identical is used in the film not just as a plot mechanism but as a sustained cultural and philosophical argument. Their identical appearance forces both the characters within the story and the audience watching it to confront the arbitrary nature of class distinctions. If two people who are physically the same can end up living such radically different lives, then the differences between their circumstances must be the result of social systems and historical accidents rather than any natural or inherent order. This argument was culturally resonant in 2004 in ways that connected to broader public conversations about inequality, privilege, and social mobility that were happening in American and global culture at the time. The early 2000s saw renewed debate about the relationship between inherited wealth and social opportunity, the barriers facing working class and poor families in accessing education and advancement, and the ways in which social systems perpetuate inequality across generations. A children's film is obviously not a political treatise, but The Princess and the Pauper encodes these questions in a form accessible to very young viewers and plants seeds of awareness that can grow as those viewers mature. Erika's liberation at the end of the film, her freedom from debt, from Madame Carp, from a life of constrained servitude, is portrayed not as a gift given to her by powerful people but as something she earns through her own courage and her own choices. She is not rescued. She rescues herself and her friend simultaneously. This is a culturally important distinction that the film handles with care. Erika does not rise from poverty to royalty through a magical transformation that validates the existing social hierarchy. She rises through moral action, and what she gains is freedom, not a higher position in the same unjust system. The musical tradition and its cultural roots, the decision to make The Princess and the Pauper a full musical, with original songs advancing the plot and developing character, places it within a long and culturally rich tradition of theatrical storytelling that stretches back centuries. The use of song to express inner emotional states that characters cannot or will not speak aloud in dialogue is one of the oldest devices in theatrical history, predating even the formal traditions of opera that developed in Europe from the late 16th century onward. In Western musical theater, which reached its golden age on Broadway in the mid-20th century, the convention of characters breaking into song during moments of peak emotional intensity became a defining feature of the genre. The great Broadway musicals of the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s used this convention to tell stories of remarkable emotional depth and social complexity, stories about immigration, racism, poverty, war, love, and loss, in a form that was both entertaining and genuinely moving. The Princess and the Pauper draws directly on this tradition, using its songs as vehicles for both character development and thematic argument in ways that reflect a genuine understanding of how musical theater works at its best. The songs in the film function as the moments when characters are most fully themselves, when Anneliese expresses the depth of her longing for freedom, when Erika voices her dreams of a different life, when the two women celebrate the unexpected joy of finding a true friend. These are not decorative moments but dramatically essential ones, and the craft with which they are integrated into the story reflects the film's genuine commitment to the musical form as a storytelling tool rather than a marketing device. The Barbie brand in historical context. Understanding the cultural and historical significance of the princess and the pauper also requires understanding the historical context of the Barbie brand itself. Barbie was introduced by Mattel in 1959, a moment in American cultural history that was simultaneously the height of post-war domestic ideology, with its emphasis on female domesticity and consumption, and the very beginning of the social transformations that would reshape gender roles throughout the 1960s and beyond. From her debut, Barbie was a culturally contested figure. On one hand, she was criticized by feminist scholars and cultural commentators as an embodiment of unrealistic beauty standards and a model of femininity that reduced women to their physical appearance and their role as consumers. On the other hand, Barbie was, from the very beginning, a doll with a career, or rather, with hundreds of careers over the decades. At a time when many children's toys for girls were limited to domestic roles, Barbie was an astronaut, a doctor, a president, a scientist, and an athlete. This tension between the brand's aesthetics and its aspirational messaging created a genuinely complex cultural object whose meaning was always contested and always evolving. By the early 2000s, when the animated film series began, Mattel was acutely conscious of this complexity and was actively trying to steer the brand toward the more aspirational, empowering dimension of Barbie's identity. The animated films were part of this effort. Each film was designed to show Barbie, and the Barbie-coded characters she played, as brave, intelligent, and capable of shaping her own destiny. The Princess and the Pauper, with its dual heroines who each earn their freedom through courage and moral action, represents the fullest realization of this ambition in the early film series and reflects a deliberate cultural strategy on Mattel's part to associate the Barbie brand with values of female agency and self-determination. The direct-to-video format and its cultural democratization. The fact that The Princess and the Pauper was released as a direct-to-video production rather than as a theatrical film is a culturally significant detail that is easy to overlook. Direct-to-video animated films occupied a specific and important cultural space in the late 1990s and early 2000s. They were priced and distributed in ways that made them accessible to families across a much wider range of economic circumstances than theatrical animated films, which require not just the price of a movie ticket but transportation, time off work, and all the additional expenses associated with a cinema visit. By releasing their animated films directly to home video, Mattel and their distribution partners were ensuring that the stories and values these films conveyed could reach the widest possible audience. A child from a low-income family who could not afford regular cinema trips could still watch and rewatch The Princess and the Pauper at home. This democratic accessibility is particularly fitting for a film whose central argument is that a person's worth has nothing to do with their economic circumstances, a message that was available to every child who watched it, regardless of their own family's financial situation. More than 2 decades after its release, Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper continues to hold a distinctive cultural position. It belongs to a generation's shared childhood memory in a way that very few direct-to-video animated films have achieved. The adults who grew up watching it consistently describe it not merely with nostalgia but with genuine appreciation, an appreciation that often deepens as they get older and begin to understand more fully the cultural and social arguments that the film was quietly making beneath its musical fairy tale surface. The film arrived at a transitional moment in children's media. When old models of passive femininity were giving way to new models of active, capable female characters, and it contributed meaningfully to that transition. It told millions of young viewers, most of them girls, though certainly not all, that intelligence and curiosity were worthy of admiration, that friendship between women was one of the most valuable things in the world, that economic circumstances do not define a person's worth, and that freedom is something worth fighting for. These were not trivial messages in 2004, and they are not trivial messages now. The film also represents a significant moment in the history of the Barbie brand, the point at which the animated series found its fullest and most ambitious voice, producing a work that stands on its own merits as a piece of musical storytelling and not merely as a piece of branded entertainment. Its influence on the subsequent development of the Barbie animated film series was substantial, setting a standard of emotional depth, musical craft, and genuine thematic ambition that the series continued to aspire toward in the years that followed. In the broader context of animation history, The Princess and the Pauper is an example of what the medium can achieve when it is treated with genuine craft and genuine respect for its audience. It did not condescend to its viewers by assuming that children could not handle complex emotions, social criticism, or genuine storytelling. It trusted that young audiences were capable of feeling the full weight of Anneliese's captivity, the injustice of Erika's bondage, and the joy of their mutual liberation. That trust, that fundamental respect for the intelligence and emotional capacity of children, is perhaps its most important cultural legacy. There is the complete cultural and historical analysis of Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper, organized across 5 major parts. Here is a quick overview of what each part covers. Part 1 goes deep into the literary heritage, who Mark Twain was, why he wrote The Prince and the Pauper in 1881, what social argument the original novel was making about class and inherited privilege, and how the film transforms that argument by changing the protagonists from boys to women, which shifts the critique from general class inequality toward the specific historical constraints placed on women through arranged marriage and economic servitude. Part 2 examines the actual medieval European world the film evokes, the feudal social structure, the historical reality of arranged marriages as diplomatic and financial instruments, the history of debt bondage and indentured servitude in the textile industry, and the very real problem of corruption among royal advisors who stole from the kingdoms they were trusted to serve. Part 3 is the richest section, covering the film's deeper cultural conversations, the early 2000s shift in how children's media depicted female characters, the cultural significance of centering female friendship rather than romance, the philosophical argument embedded in the identical appearance device, the musical theater tradition the film draws from, the complex and contested cultural history of the Barbie brand itself, and how the direct-to-video format democratized access to the film's messages across economic classes.